Hi, friends. Kevin Tully here um, with the last in this six-part series of Bible studies on the old story, in which we've been taking a look at those stories from the book of Genesis, the first 11 chapters, which are not only earliest in terms of being on the first pages of the Bible, but earliest in terms of what they seek to convey as that which is foundational, most essential, most crucial. They tell us the way things are. They tell us who made them and who set them up this way. They tell us deep and eternal truths that continue to be the case even today. They tell us about the way God has made things and about the way life works. Like many of you, my life has been a little bit upset by the COVID-19 pandemic in which we find ourselves. But on the bright side, the fact that I am able to come to you this way in this video format provides an opportunity for the future as well. Now that we've got these recorded, perhaps there are individuals who will be browsing through YouTube, or perhaps small groups in our church who will seek to use them for future studies. I'm grateful for that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in this. And I look forward to the next time that we're able to be a part of such a study, hopefully face to face. Today, we're taking a look at the story of the Tower of Babel from Genesis 11. In this brief story, and it is very brief, just 9 verses, there are such profound truths that I hope to explore with you. After this brief story, if you want to just look at or are looking at the text as it appears in your Bible, you'll see that this story just takes up 9 verses at the first of chapter 11. And then we have a series of generational or genealogical information which links these prehistoric, primordial stories to the historical stories of the Hebrew people. So, by the time we get to Genesis 12, we've moved out of the mythological and etiological stories to talking about a verifiable human being whose life we can roughly date and who we know existed. That person is Abram, or Abraham, as his name would later become. And he is the one that the Bible calls the father of our faith. It's important that we remember he is the one to whom all 3 of the great monotheistic faiths of the world all trace themselves. They all find their origin in him. Judaism, Christianity, Islam all trace themselves back to Abraham. The story of the Tower of Babel is strange in many ways. It is etiological, that is to say, it means to explain where some stuff came from. It's a way of explaining to children and others, this is how we got to where we are. In this case, the story serves to explain why there are so many different people of so many different cultures and colors and ethnicities who speak all these different languages. But I want to remind you that these stories also seek to convey these deep eternal truths with this amazing economy of words. As I've mentioned already, we're just talking about 9 verses here. And yet, in these 9 verses, there is such a profound message conveyed, which I think that we will see before I'm finished with this lesson, that are so very applicable even today. Why is that so? Because these stories tell us the way things are, the way people are, the way life works. Let's take a look at the text, shall we? I'll be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. You may have a different version in front of you. That's fine. I hope you'll mark and take note of those things that are intriguing to you for your own study after this video. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. As they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar, and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, "Look, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. The first things that we would notice about this story are the us in this. This is relating to that idea that we came to before. In fact, in the very first story of creation, where God, in speaking, says, "Let us." Who are the others? Well, this is an assumption that because kings and rulers of that day and time had courts and had servants, that certainly God would have those as well. So whether you think of angels or heavenly beings or powers available to God, God is addressing this court. The second thing we would notice about this story is that from a human standpoint, God doesn't come off very well in this story. God apparently feels threatened or stands in the way of human progress. That's one way to read it, and that's a strange thing. But this is also something that the Hebrew people were not afraid of saying. This idea of a God who might change his mind or regret decisions that he has made or even repent of what he has done, as in the story of Noah. God in these stories is given anthropomorphic shape and characteristics, human-like characteristics, as a way of helping us understand and relate to what God is like. There are also later on in the Bible these strange conversations that God has with certain individuals in which people argue with God and negotiate with God and sort of talk God out of a certain idea that God has in God's mind. The case of Abraham and Moses and others. In some ways this is strange, but there it is. This story, however, is not so much about God as it is about human beings, and especially our tendency to hubris. That's a good word if you don't know it. Hubris. Hubris is an attitude of arrogance, of being a know-it-all. Hubris is the human tendency to pride and overconfidence. In the Catholic teaching, the Roman Catholic teaching of the 7 deadly sins, they are not listed as such in the Bible. They're never listed, these 7. But it's a good teaching, and I think it's properly founded. There is one sin that is worse than all the others. And they've got some bad ones on there. Sloth and gluttony and avarice and lust. But the worst one? Pride. Pride is what keeps us from looking to God for the answers. Pride is that thing that causes human beings to say, "I don't need anybody else's help," or "These old commandments, they don't matter anymore. We can figure this out on our own." The human beings in the story are so proud of their accomplishments that they think they are going to build something to reach up to heaven. In other words, they will inhabit the realm of God. Now, whether this is physically possible, it was in their day imaginable that if you got high enough, you would get to where God lives. We might not buy into that now that we have what we hope is a more sophisticated understanding of the universe and the location of God. But the idea of us being able to reach up to where God is and become like God, now that is a principle which still applies. If this happens, if the people are able to get up there, they then, we assume, or it is implied, they'll have no need for God. They'll be like God. Now we remember that first story, actually the second story, where Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. Do you recall that? And how was it that the serpent tempted Eve? Oh, you can go ahead and eat that. After all, if you do, it will make you like God. There is in this story also the very clear teaching that it is because of these people's discoveries. We would think it primitive, okay, bricks, big deal. Being able to build monumental architecture, big deal. But for them, and a long time ago, that was significant. But it is their technological ability that makes them so prone to do this. They are very enamored with how smart and capable they are. There are a few times in my life when I have witnessed someone being very prescient. That's a good word, too. Prescient, Prescient. It means having knowledge of things before they happen, being able to predict things before they even exist. And one of the occasions on which I witnessed someone I believe being very prescient or prescient, as some pronounce it, was in an ethics class when I was in seminary on the campus of Southern Methodist University in Dallas. It was near the end of the semester, and to the best of my recollection, our professor was seeking to sum up much of what we had learned during that course. And looking out at the class and realizing that we were about to be deployed out into the world to be pastors and ministers to a great number of individuals in a wide variety of settings, he said, if I had a recommendation for all of you, it would be to begin to get good at the subject of bioethics. Bioethics, of course, is the field of study concerned with the ethics of life, the philosophical implications of biological and medical procedures, technologies, treatments, things like organ transplants or genetic engineering or care of the terminally ill. And I think my professor was being especially foresighted in his recommendation. So that now, some years later, even then and ever since then, but in an ever increasing fashion, we are nearing the time, if it's not already present somewhere, when the possibilities of creating designer babies will be ours. Manipulating genes so that you get a baby that looks the way you want this baby to look. If you want a tall kid, you order up a tall kid. If you want a brunette kid, you order up one of those, or a boy or a girl. And the question is, even though we can, should we? The technologies exist to keep a body alive for a long time, almost indefinitely, even after brain function has ceased. Yes, we can, but should we? We may soon have the ability to predict a person's potential for certain things by tests. In which case, the next step might be to put all of some kinds of people or children into one group because, after all, you're not going to really succeed at this other stuff. And to take another group and say, we're going to give you all these opportunities. We're going to steer you this direction because you are genetically or emotionally a better investment of our resources. We might be able to get to the point of doing this, but should we? The reason we have to monitor nuclear armaments is because the very real possibility exists, and I believe in some people, in the human heart of some individuals, exists this willingness to do whatever we can. If we can do it, let's do it. Regardless of whether it's right or good for others, whether it's right or good for the planet, we can. We'll be the ones who decide what's good. Is that the way it should be? The story suggests that God has placed a limit on such things. There are some things we are simply not supposed to do in challenging what God alone can do. But because of human pride and arrogance, there's a very real possibility that we might venture into this realm. Take, for example, the case of the current COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected not just people in the United States, but worldwide. And it's interesting to think, with all our abilities to sort of shape our universe, to accrue wealth, to display our power, there are some things that we can put all our marvelous technology to doing, and yet our lives have been put on hold. I am not one of those preachers who is going to say God sent this as a way of getting us to wake up. God sent this as a punishment. But it's interesting to note that in a very real way, we all have been scattered to our individual homes. We have been separated from one another. Many of the grand projects that we were so excited about accomplishing have now been brought to a sudden stop. The story seems to give warnings about people trying to get together to challenge God, but maybe the warning is about trying to accomplish certain things without God, without an appreciation for the place of God, the importance of God, without God's direction. After all, there's nothing in this story about the people doing this big building project to the glory of God, or because they thought it would please God, or because God had given them instructions to do so. It was all about them and what they thought would be a cool thing to do and would make them famous. It seems to me that we can ruin the environment in search of what we want to build or accomplish, but what then? What good is a really well-functioning economy or society or a really mighty nation with these amazing defense capabilities if the earth itself is poisoned to the point of not being able to sustain life? In light of what we are going through now, what good is having a big, beautiful house with 4.5 bathrooms if you can't even buy toilet paper for one of them? One thinks of that story that Jesus told about a rich farmer who had all this grain, a bumper crop, was planning on tearing down his barns, building bigger ones, and God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" Jesus ends that parable by saying, "So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." So it's fairly easy to imagine these days someone who has gotten all this stuff by hook or by crook, who has achieved great prominence in terms of the media or because of people's awareness of who they are. All these things they have accomplished, and yet what good is all of that if they're on a ventilator with the COVID-19 virus, or if their soul is empty, or if they have no real love of friends or family, nothing that they've really done for humanity or for others. There's one more warning here, and I think it's on a personal level. At least I take it that way. Almost every time it seems to me that we see someone get in trouble, some leader, some pastor, some prominent Christian, those are the ones I pay attention to and try and heed the warnings of. It seems to me that ego is involved. This person who knows this thing is wrong, but they think, I'm so smart, I won't get caught. The person who knows and maybe even preaches that there are these commandments and there are some things you're not supposed to do, these rules that God has given us for our own good. But they seem to think, hey, I'm the exception to the rule. We saw that, I think, in a way with the 2008 recession, economic recession, and the near crash of the stock market. We began to hear the phrase, too big to fail. What we found out is that these corporations were not too big to fail. They simply required a government bailout to stay afloat. Well, it's an interesting story, isn't it? I hope that you will continue to look at it and let it work on you. That's the real value of these stories. We work on them a little bit, and they work on us a lot. Maybe for the rest of our lives. And that would be a good thing. Thanks for watching and being a part of the 6 weeks of the old stories. I'm Kevin Tully. I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless you. Bye-bye.